one down. And my name is Steve Stelzer. I'm the program director. Behind you is the Green Building Resource Center. It's after 6 and the lights went off. Yes, all right. I got to tell you something else that's pretty cool. In this building, after 6, after 15 minutes of inactivity, the computer monitors automatically go off. 99%. Okay, I know you're not like wiped out about that, but I am. I've been trying to do that for a long time, and it happened. So that's exciting. All right, we're open all week. We're open on the second Saturday of the month from 10 to 2, so people have to work. I also complimentary interim plan review for any building that you want to green up and get some green building strategies. You know, set up a time, come on in, I'll go over it with you. I'm full of ideas, and I've actually done a few, so you know, that should work. What else? And then we have these monthly sessions and lots of fun stuff going on. This climate action plan has also been really wonderful. So I do want to give a couple of moments to the U.S. Green Building Council chapter here. Devin, did you want to say a couple of words? Just kind of a little advertisement here for what's going on with the chapter.
So my name is Devin Robinson. I'm with the United States Green Building Council. We have the Texas Gulf Council, which is for the region with all everything we've experienced over the past 24 to 26 months with the storms.
You want to step up to the mic?
I've kind of come on board to help as a native Houstonian and as someone from Galveston to try and encourage membership and to try and just let the general public at large know about what we can do to help our city. So I'll be around after if anybody has any questions about joining the USGBC for the Texas Gulf Council here. We also help with giving educational seminars so you can become a lead AP at no charge to you. We have 2 events coming up, April 6th, which will be from 8 a.m. to 12 noon at the offices of Gensler, right over here in Louisiana, I believe. And then also April 16th from 3 to 7 p.m. at the offices of Kirksey. Other than that, I will be attending the Earth Day Fair. So again, we'll be out making some advocacy and membership inquiries. And like I said, we'd love to have you on board. So I want to thank Steve for everything he's done for propagating green building in the city of Houston. I've actually known Steve for about 15, 16 years now. He's the first architect I ever worked under, if you can imagine that. And he's as passionate as I hope the rest of us can be about what our city needs to be really resilient and not just talk about being resilient. Okay? Thank you.
All right, so see, we have 3 seats for our speakers, but I think they're comfortably sitting in other places, but you're welcome to sit up here, and I've got the name tags up here. So we're going to start off with, let's see, if you breathe it and you drink it and you sit on it, then what's in it? So let's start off with breathing. And I got let me tee up the other one here, because I got Lawrence is up, who's going to go next. There we go. All right. So Paige Powell with Air Alliance Houston. And Paige, I'm going to ask that you start off by kind of talking about yourself and how you got involved and engaged with Air Alliance and what you do over there. And I've known you for a few years, and I'm really glad that you're here to talk about our air situation in Houston. Let's have a round of applause for Paige Powell.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Paige Powell. I work as the Director of Operations for Air Alliance Houston, and I've been there for about 5.5 years. And one of my roles there has been Educational Programs Director. And so I've taught about air pollution problems in Houston from kindergartners up through high school, and of course, adults as well. And it's always hardest with adults because I don't know where everybody's coming from, right? You have very diverse backgrounds. So before I talk about me, I'd like to know a little bit about you. So could we just do a show of hands of who's an architect, who's a developer or a builder, who's just here because they're interested in green stuff? Is there anybody else that I kind of missed? do you want to like tell me where you're coming from maybe, or no? Okay, good. So I live, work, and play, like I breathe air, live, work, and breathe air pollution, right? And I talk about it all the time. So I try not to like gloss over things, because things that I think take as very like well understood may not be. So hopefully I found a pretty good middle ground here of the basics of what is the problem of air pollution in Houston, where does it come from, and how does it relate to green building, right? So that was my understanding for this group, was sort of like air pollution in the manufacture and use of building materials, right? And a little bit about myself, I have a degree in economics, and I'm currently pursuing a master's degree in public policy at U of H. I'm really interested in global warming and climate action solutions, and I've been active in the green community in Houston for about 15 years. I had asthma as a kid. I grew up in League City, kind of near the refineries. It was like, oh, Texas City blew up again, and that was just something that like we understood. And living in Houston for over 30 years, I know a lot of people who have asthma and cancers, a lot of people who work for the refineries, a lot of people who have seen the flooding and the air pollution emissions problems, and a lot of people who are starting to get upset and active around it. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to work for Air Alliance Houston and do the work that I do, because I don't think that there's a more important cause, to be honest. So there we are. So this is why we do what we do. Air pollution affects pretty much every component of your body. It's not just your lungs, right? It's your heart and your bloodstream. Actually, your bones even can induce osteoarthritis, cancer, strokes, all kinds of things. Special words like it can cause cancer and make you dumber. That's the neurotoxin, right? It affects your cognitive ability. And like kids in China who are walking to school with their masks on because of smog, they're not going to be as smart as they would if they weren't bombarded with such horrible air pollution. And life expectancy around the world, like what was the report last year, 2016, 7 million people died prematurely because of air pollution globally. And so I don't know what the numbers are in Houston exactly, right? But you know that we have a problem here with air pollution, and it affects our health. And so that's really why we do what we do. These are a lot of the air toxics and volatile organic compounds that can be emitted, or like in the manufacturing of plastics, and like maybe the chair that you're sitting on. I don't know if it was recycled or whatever human scale, but like in basically all of the petrochemical refineries in Houston, and these are not specific to the Houston area. These are just the 40 main air toxics that EPA is concerned about, and kind of something that we're interested in. And indoor air pollution actually in many instances can be much worse than outdoor air pollution. And obviously this comes from your building materials and stuff that you use in your home, a lot of cleaning supplies and household and like fragrances, things like that. And of course all these things in fuels and machinery. Hopefully all of you know, if you didn't know, I didn't know before I worked at Air Alliance Houston how ozone was formed, and the difference between good ozone in the stratosphere and tropospheric ozone, which can make us sick, right? And we have a really bad problem with ozone and smog in Houston. It's a lot better than it used to be in the 80s, but smog and asthma can, irritate your eyes, and it can induce asthma attacks. The number one reason why children are absent from school is because of asthma, and it's worse on high ozone days. So when we talk about these like volatile organic compounds and the toxics that were on that list, those can interact with like our major sunlight in Houston and cause bad problem of smog. And so I just want to go through the types of air pollution real quick so that we're all on the same page. So we have like ozone and smog, that only occurs outdoor. Particulate matters, fine particles, which usually comes from emissions from refineries, are also tailpipes. And if they're small enough, that PM 2.5 is 2.5 microns in diameter, and it can actually cross over through your lungs and into your bloodstream. So if these toxic chemicals are small enough and the particulate is small enough, now we're talking about getting into your bloodstream. And I am not a doctor, but I could make an assumption that that's where some kinds of cancers and other like chronic illnesses come from, right? Like the exposure of like high toxicity to these like very small, fine toxic chemicals. And then, of course, carbon. We're all familiar with the problem of carbon and global warming right now, whether or not you believe in that. Hopefully you all do, since you're sitting here, right? And that's not something that we need to like worry about from off-gassing in our building materials, but in the manufacture of building materials, you have carbon, right? And so when you think about everything that you sit on or everything that's around us, there's the mining of the materials, the manufacture, then the transportation, the installation, and like all of the construction, the emissions from that. So we talked about the types of air pollution, and then of course you have your mobile sources, which is like the transportation of building materials through trains and on ships, right? Anything that you buy from overseas that comes over. Bunker fuel for large container ships is much dirtier than the fuel that we use on land, and so has a higher, emissions. And then, of course, the largest petrochemical refining complex in the entire world right here in our backyard, just to mention that little thing, right? And so we have this like really specific issue in Houston of like the more plastics we use, not only does it contribute to like this greater problem of like plastics in the ocean and like not recycling, but it like directly impacts our health, our physical health, and the air that we breathe here. There's like a new Exxon, I think, just started building or is opening this new plastics plant over on I-10 East, and like we're just like expanding our container capacity with the Port of Houston. We're expanding our plastics production and the export of more of that. So if you have the ability, I would just urge any of you who are architects and designers and developers, if you have the ability to minimize your plastic use, not only is that gonna like help the rest of the world in the long run and like maybe mitigate some of these global warming problems, but it's directly gonna have an impact here in Houston, especially for communities that live right next to those refineries. And there are a lot of those that like, there's a house right next to a container that's, holding polymer liquids or whatever the chemicals are. So all of those big white containers, right? So there's like major sources. And then these minor sources of air pollution, these are like, have gotten a lot more publicity, I feel. We've been working on a lot more of these minor sources recently. This is a picture of a concrete batch plant. And so when you think about all of the construction, all of the roads being laid, all of the concrete being poured in Houston, let's say for like the I-45 expansion or the high-speed rail that's gonna go to Dallas, these concrete batch plants pop up in neighborhoods. And so all of the surrounding community, the homes, the animals, the plants are like dusted with fine concrete particulate. So the kids are breathing that in. It's getting into the water supply and everything else, right? So, if we could, in an ideal world, minimize the use of concrete, we could mitigate some of like this problem. Metal recycling facilities as well, when they're crushed, fine, like metal particles are put off. And then there's also like the diesel trucks like lined up to service these facilities that also emit. So that's another problem. And then, there we go. This is a picture of, I think it's Greenhouse Road, and it's a landfill, right? Like out near Katy, and you can see the houses right next to it. And they have all of these like air barriers or like this Febreze type spray that they spray on it. Like, I don't think that's actually helping, right? It's like masking the problem, but it's just adding to the problem of emissions and off-gassing from these facilities that are situated right next to residential homes areas. So all of those are like kind of the biggest sources of air pollution in Houston. And this is from the TCEQ website of all of the monitors, not just the regulatory monitors, but other monitors in the network and TCEQ's inventory that they look at. And so we are, like, people would say that we're the most heavily monitored city for air pollution in the world, at least in the United States. And that's true. So we know what's going on at least out there, but we don't really know what's going on inside. And I think that may be a bigger problem is indoor air quality. There is no like monitoring network or any sort of standards like the Clean Air Act for indoor air quality, as far as I'm aware. Now, there may be some people in here who are registered with Green Building Council that maybe know about like higher LEED standards, but as far as I know, EPA and the Clean Air Act only enforces like outdoor air quality, ambient air quality, and so the city of Houston is not in attainment, has never been in attainment for air quality standards, even though we have all of this monitoring, but there's not even any sort of like standards or monitoring for indoor air quality. And so it's like, what can we do about indoor air quality? And this is my biggest answer to anybody who asks me that. It's like proper ventilation, right? Reduction of any sort of like hazardous toxic VOC off-gassing materials. And then like the installation of like more plants, because NASA did, it doesn't even say it on there, but like NASA did a study of the, you know, best house plants that improve indoor air quality, and they can sort of filter and mitigate all of these benzene, formaldehyde, whatever. They also make your air fresher. And a lot of these, I have every single one of these. They're all like really easy to keep alive. I know that's maybe a consideration for some people. My daughter is in 3rd grade, and last year I walked into the temporary building and I was like, oh, what is that smell, you know, coming off of the walls? And we talked with her teacher, and we had a donation to get some plants put in the classroom. And I just think it's really important that people be aware of their surroundings. Not everybody is as sensitive, can even tell like they're walking into a toxic building. If you have the opportunity to advocate for somebody who may not have the resources to do so for themselves, like a child in a school, perhaps you could do something like that. But we don't currently have any standardized resources for reporting or mitigating indoor air pollution. It's something that we're currently working on as we're expanding our capacity at Air Alliance Houston. And then so obviously like long-term solutions would be to like just go green all over, right? This is a pretty like childish looking diagram, but I like the colors, you know, and it's like make greener cities, more compact cities, energy efficient buildings, and all of you already know that, right? So it's just a matter of being forward thinking, trying to plan for the future that we want, minimize, you know, hazardous building materials and their transportation distance, and, you know, offset any current existing like toxic materials through ventilation and plants and things like that. So we do research, education, and advocacy to improve public health in Houston, and I would love to tell you more about any of our projects. But I think I may be out of time. So thank you so much for your attention.
Any quick questions for Paige while I...
Turn this around.
I wasn't sure if we were doing them like as we went or all up here together, but I told you the whole story. I have no
There you go.
questions. Great.
I think I pushed the wrong button. Yep, I pushed the wrong button. All right, let's have an awkward, you know, IT fiasco moment.
While you're doing that,
Sure.
when you have the city slideshow with the circles on, what were you saying?
So that slide was from the TCEQ, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, and all of those represent not just the regulatory monitors, but other independent monitors as well. And the colors in there represented things that they measured for, like some measure ozone, some measure particulates, some measure different toxics and VOCs. And so those are essentially all of the monitors in the Houston area, and they're most heavily concentrated, you can see, on the east side and kind of where all of the industry is. And as you go further out, you know, in the rest of the state of Texas, there are few and far between. And so it's interesting that we don't have a very perfect or complete map of the problem because of the irregular distribution of monitors. Obviously, it's a matter of like funds and capacity to be able to do so, but yes.
Okay, excuse me. Steve had asked that I ask the speakers to repeat the questions since we only have the one microphone.
Okay.
And when you answer, if you could go up there so he could have it on the video.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
Just to follow up question, is that a website that anybody can go to and look at the monitors and what's happening at real time?
He's asking if that was a website to check to see if the monitors were monitoring in real time.
Yeah, that was a website. I don't know that you can see them in real time. It'd be interesting to check that out. I did not notice that, but you probably can. TCEQ does have reporting capability. To put it nicely, their website is difficult to navigate. Um, so the information is there. It may not be as accessible as we would like. One of the best resources that I would say if you're concerned about maybe air pollution in your area is Neighborhood Witness is a website, or it's a coalition of Environment Texas, Environmental Integrity Project, Public Citizen, Air Alliance Houston, I believe those four. And the Neighborhood Witness project or database is basically you can sign up with your email and put in your zip code in your county, and anytime there's an emissions event in your zip code or in the designated area parameters that you include, you'll get an email to say like there was an emissions event with 2,300 tons of whatever, and you can click through. It'll take you to TCEQ's Steers database emissions event website, and you can see exactly what was emitted. So that's been very helpful for me, even as an air quality professional, to have to go through, versus having to go through TCEQ's website, set the parameters, do the search. Neighborhood Witness basically took all of the work for you. So I would recommend that one. And I don't know if TCEQ monitors are necessarily live on that page.
Yes, sir.
Can you maybe talk more about what you're finding in the public policy sector of the East End? Because I grew up along the ship channel until 25 in Deer Park, Galena Heights, South Houston, the whole nine. And actually, my mom works at the petrochemical industry.
Yeah.
You know, in the past 30 years, that whole area has kind of downgraded with regard to affordability and how people can own it. It's a lot of rental homes now. It's a lot of low income and stuff like that. People that, as you stated, can't advocate or don't advocate for themselves. So I'm curious as to what you are finding like development-wise out there. You mentioned the I-10 project with Exxon, land's cheap, there's a plane,
Right.
y'all look into that type of stuff?
So to repeat the question, what are the development policy implications of basically environmental justice neighborhoods on the east side of Houston and Galena Park and Chisano City? So we are currently doing a land use assessment with the Kinder Institute to understand buyout programs and plans, and to see like what other cities have done as sort of a long-term, ideal solution. I don't know, I mean, my intuition would say that clearly property values go down when more industry comes in because people are aware of the health impacts, the public health impacts. We actually did a health impact assessment survey of Galena Park. We're currently doing one, or we just recently did one of Pasadena. And, people report higher instances of asthma and cancers there. It's not just lung cancer, it's skin cancer, things like that. So people are either moving out or they can't afford to move out, because even if they wanted to get bought out, their house isn't worth as much. That's a really big problem in the community of Manchester, which is right next to the Valero refinery. That Valero will offer to buy their house, but they're only wanting to give them $25,000 or $50,000. And what is that person supposed to do elsewhere? They can't buy a home comparable to where they were living, so they just decide to stay. And so it's entire communities and families that are sort of like becoming more impoverished because of the development and the industry that's grown up around them. There are not a lot of good answers. I feel like because of Harvey and the flooding issues that happened around the bayous and around, low-lying lands, that we have an opportunity as a city to rebuild. Everybody's talking about rebuilding stronger and smarter, but to look at the more vulnerable communities along the ship channel, along the bayous, and to say, hey, what are the possibilities for increasing density at higher altitudes, et cetera. So, like I said, we're currently doing a land use assessment. I think a lot of people are going to have to look at this to sort of make the best decisions. And because of like the interjurisdictional nature of the city of Houston and Harris County and all of those little individual municipalities, it's going to be a complex solution, right, to take in all of those stakeholders' concerns. Okay, thank you very much.
All right, well, thank you.
Well, thanks for all the interaction and engagement. Wow, I'm like dying on this laptop. Appreciate that. So ask a few questions. Actually, that kind of helped. I thought the questions were really great. So thanks, folks. Questions are good. So now we're going to move on to Lawrence Childress. Lawrence is one of the people who offices here in the same building that I do. And so, Lawrence, if you could start off by kind of telling the folks, how long you've been with us and what you do. And he's one of those inspector types that is taking care of things, out in the field. So I thought that might be kind of interesting. So let people know. All right, here's Lawrence.
My name is Lawrence Childress. I work here for the city in the office of the city engineer. My responsibilities, what we're tasked with here, is we enforce the EPA Clean Water Act and the TCEQ regulations where it concerns construction activity and the MSG permit here in the city, or the industrial permit. Oh, by the way, this is real informal. If you have a question, don't hesitate to interrupt. I'll try not to use acronyms. If I do, if I mess up, y'all hold me to task, okay? So tonight we're going to be talking about the Construction General Permit, or the TXR 15, as many people call it. And what we do, we enforce these TCEQ regulations within the city limits of Houston. This particular permit is issued by the TCEQ, and it's renewed every 5 years. We've just had it renewed here recently, and our current permit will expire on March 5th, 2023. Sorry about that. If you have an active permit at the time of renewal, you have to get a new permit, okay? If you do have a current permit and that 5 years runs out, you have a 90-day grace period, and so you can reapply for your permit. There's a few things that were new in the last permit that we'd like to see a lot of the contractors to utilize more fully, and one of them is especially with large construction sites. If you have 50 acres or so, something like that, instead of clearing and grubbing the entire 50 acres at one time, which may be a little more economically feasible, if you stage your clearing, that way you don't have the entire 50 acres disturbed, and so you'll have a lot less runoff into the streams and the storm sewers. Also, the last permit required a buffer zone to be held around streams and water bodies, and I don't know what it is, but I guess a lot of the contractors or owners, developers, really just hadn't really read the permit, so they're not they don't always do that as they should. Also, they're asked to leave a grass verge around the perimeter of the property, and I guess we're all used to seeing this silt fence, this black fencing around construction sites, but when you leave a natural grass verge, that right there really enhances if you use silt fence, you can use several best management practices. And of course, that grass verge is a natural best management practice that's already there. And so that right there really helps to reduce any sediment, silt sediment, mud in the runoff. Also, anytime you have a construction site of greater than 10 acres, you're supposed to have a sedimentation pond. So you contour that your site you're developing to drain to that sedimentation pond to actually augment the settling of the solids and stuff that is disturbed as you have rain events. And of course, you're supposed to inspect your construction site on a regular basis, but also after every quarter-inch rainfall. And of course, lately it seems like all it does is rain. Now, the new permit, our current permit, has some changes in it that's a lot of them, I feel like are for the betterment. Electronic submission is required for for all the permits. There are a few exceptions, but generally they want everything electronic now. Also, the material stockpiles that you have on location, the material stockpiles and demolition have been added to the definitions, which help to clarify it, because actually construction really begins when you tear a building down. So the demolition, you should have a construction permit at that time. They clarified some of the waters of the U.S., some of the definitions on that, changed some of the parameters on concrete batch plants for the total TSS, total suspended solids. They've reduced that from 100 milligrams per liter to 50 milligrams per liter, and that helps to coincide with the MSGP permit, or multi-sector general permit. Yes, ma'am.
With the clarification of the waters of the U.S., how does that affect the values in and around these?
That right there.
You have to repeat, I'm sorry, you have to repeat the question.
I'm sorry. How does the definition or the redefining of the waters of the U.S. affect waters here locally? Previous administration painted the waters of the U.S. with a very broad brush. Okay, the current definitions actually is more restrictive, and so it's more clear who is, what really is waters of the U.S. I know here in Texas, just ditch water was considered, just about waters of the U.S., which, I feel like was a little ludicrous, but this right here just does help to redefine it. If you look at the permit, there is, in the first few pages, there's a whole list of definitions, and so you can get a much better idea with that, and I'd refer you to that. Also, the next thing is you want to minimize the exposure of any waste material, so they've added something where you have to have a covered waste bin. You should have a covered waste bin, because many of the, and I know it on smaller sites, well, we'll get to that in a minute, but the permitted sites, you do have to have a covered waste bin, okay? And that right there, many of these roll-off boxes, they don't have a seal, so any rain that falls in them falls inside, and whatever is inside, then it just runs out the bottom, and then, of course, it runs out into the storm sewer. These are a couple of useful websites that I'm sure y'all probably already have these on your computers and stuff, but it has some good information. The local one, the Clean Water Clear Choice, or Clean Waterways, is a good local website, has lots of good information. One of the things that I know we look at really pretty closely, of course, we're part of the city. We have when we had the drought here a few years back, we had lots of breaks in our water lines just everywhere, it seemed like. They were always chasing those to keep those, try to fix them, and that was a tough job. Anyway, when they do repair these lines, they have to disinfect them, and what they do, they'll hyperchlorinate that with high levels of chlorine. Well, you don't want that high level of chlorine just to go into the storm sewer. So one of the requirements is, and we've worked with the water department here to make sure that when they do disinfect the line, that they do dechlorinate the water when they release it. So you can release that water into the storm sewer, but it has to be dechlorinated. Some of the other things that we commonly see, it's not unusual with the construction activity we have. Streets are always tore up. You see people out there with these concrete saws, and of course they have to cool their blades. They have all this water running off. And where does it run to? It runs right to the storm sewer. And sometimes you just kind of get used to seeing things and you don't think about it. Well, we were out one day and we decided we'd look a little closer at that. And we were getting high pH readings on this runoff water. Of course, the good thing is it's not a high volume, but still, it is a high pH, and if you had large enough volumes and stuff, it can affect the fish and the plants in our waterways. So we started really looking at that real close, talking to our contractors, and of course the first thing they thought of, of course it does cost money. Everything we do costs money. That's the fact of life, okay? But they were thinking vacuum trucks, big vacuum truck had to have out there for every little saw cut. Well, I agree with them. That's not really a practical solution. But you can, you can do it really with these small vacuums, these vacuums these garage vacs and stuff like that, wet dry vacs. So, that right there is fairly inexpensive. You can do that, suck it up. And, oh, by the way, Steve, if I get carried away and run out of time, you tell me, okay? All right, thank you. Because I just keep going sometimes, so I get a little carried away. Then you have this high pH water, you have to dispose of. And you can do that several ways. If you have some, usually you have to pour concrete back on the saw cut that you had, so you can utilize that as makeup water with that.
Hey, Lawrence?
Yes.
So while you're on that, being familiar myself with the construction process, just what is it that these, that last slide talked about, what you do with your concrete discharge? So what are we expecting contractors to do with their washout from their concrete trucks anyway?
Well, we will, actually, we have a slide for that. But that is a good question. But what it is, there are several different methods for just makeup for this water and stuff like this that we on saw cuts, or what I would recommend is putting that as makeup water when they pour when they re-pour that section of roadway or slab or something like that. You can utilize it like that because you already have your concrete there, and it's such a low volume, it really won't hurt your mix. Okay? When do we need a permit? When we started this program with the City of Houston, I cannot tell you that the contractors had no clue that a permit was required, or if they did, they sure played dumb real well. No, but we really, every site we went to, we'd go out to a site, and of course we'd be in a city vehicle, and we'd pull up and we'd tell them that you want to look at their TCEQ permit, and oh yeah, we got permits, and they'd bring out all these City of Houston permits, and that's good. I said, that's great. We're glad you got those permits, but that's not what I'm looking for. I want to look at your Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, your construction general permit. And they didn't have a clue. We still get that from time to time. I don't buy that too much anymore, because if you're a contractor or a builder or a developer, you're probably as familiar with it as I am, or you should be. But long story short, when is a permit required? We still get questions with that. In the TCEQ construction general permit, they have a little flow chart, which I feel like is, I'm glad they have it. It does clarify things to a point. If you're less than 1 acre of disturbed area, you don't need a permit. You don't need a TCEQ or an EPA permit. Let's be a little more specific, okay? You need all these city permits, okay? You need those things, but as far as the TCEQ or the construction general permit, you don't need a permit. Now, if your site is 1 acre or more, there's 2 categories that can go into. If you're from 1 acre to 5 acres, to just less than 5 acres, then you have to have what they call a small construction permit, a CSN, construction site notice. Okay, and so with that, you have your construction site notice, which you can download online. It takes about 5 minutes to fill it out, and you send a copy to my office to notify us that there's a construction site. The second thing you do is you post that copy or a copy there at your construction entrance. That's the easy part. Now, the more difficult and the costly part, you have to have a stormwater pollution prevention plan. Okay, now the plan, so many times, I'll go to a site and ask for that, and in their plan set of drawings, there is one sheet they call the stormwater pollution prevention plan. So they're all happy that they have that. Well, that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for a book. In the construction general permit, there's about 10 pages. It says, as a minimum, you must have the following in your stormwater pollution prevention plan. Okay? Now, anybody can follow that and do it, but there's some details there, and there's some things that are a little bit, you have to have a little knowledge of the environmental regulations and the construction side of it too, to really do it properly. So that right there is going to generally, environmental contractor will be tickled to fix you one up, okay, for a slight fee, okay? And they'll be happy to do they'll do that and hand that to you, or they'll go ahead and they'll say, okay, we'll go out and we'll do your weekly inspections for you. We'll make sure that you're in compliance. We'll do all your maintenance on your best management practices that is outlined in your in the stormwater pollution prevention plan. Early on, a lot of contractors would just kind of use the same one and ship it to the next construction site. Matter of fact, a lot of times they wouldn't even change the name on it or the address. So, but this plan has to be site specific. Okay. Now, for the permit for this small construction site permit, there's no charge. Matter of fact, you don't even send a copy to the TCEQ. You send it to the local MS4 operator, which is us here, and you post it there at the construction site entrance. The reason they want you to post it at the entrance is because if a new site in your neighborhood and you're wondering what the heck are they building here, what's going on, or for if you need an emergency contact, if something's burning back there, okay, who do you call besides the fire department? Anyway, it has emergency information, so you don't have to trespass on a active construction site, which is dangerous. Anyway, so you have that information right there, and you could get that information just from that signage right there. The last type is for construction sites that's 5 acres and greater, and that is going to cost you money. That's a permit that has more information. You fill this permit out. Now it's online. They ask you to do it online. There are some exceptions. You send that to the TCEQ. They approve it. They'll send you a certificate back, and you send it to the TCEQ. You send a copy to my office notifying us that you have a construction site here. You do the same thing. You have a stormwater pollution prevention plan. Now, all these things have to be implemented before you turn that first shovel full of dirt, or supposed to be. Okay, that's the whole idea. Sometimes they get the cart before the horse. We try to work with them as much as we can. If they have their stormwater pollution prevention plan, or SWP3 plan, is what's a lot of people will call that. If you have that implemented, we might cut you a little bit of slack. Go ahead and get your permit, and I realize timetables change sometimes. Okay, but we try to be as friendly as we can, but still enforce these regulations. Okay, so it's kind of, and it doesn't matter. I'm the bad guy either way, It's so I get rocks thrown at me from both sides. But that's okay. We just talked about all this. Okay, you have to for the small construction site, you submit your CSN construction site notice to us. You post it. And 2 days before you ever start, you implement your stormwater pollution prevention plan, SWP3 plan, And by the way, what a lot of people don't realize, that the SWP3 plan, you know, the whole idea about a construction site, hopefully it changes every day. You know, that's the whole idea. And this SWP3 plan is a living document. If you need to move your construction entrance from one side to another, that don't bother me a bit. That's fantastic. Go ahead and do it. Note that on your plan. So when our inspectors come out, they can look at your plan. The first thing they'll do is invite the superintendent to go on the site inspection with them. That's one of the first things. They tell them, you tell them that we're on site. Then we'll look at their SWP3 plan. We'll look at that, and any changes, I tell them that we understand red pencil. So go ahead and, okay, mark this out. Tell them, okay, that you close this entrance, put a date and initial it. You moved it down here to the other end, draw that in, put a date and your initials. And so we, you know, you don't have to have a new draftsman do a new drawing for you every time you make a change. That's okay. Your best management practices may change. A silt fence may be fine in some areas. There may be other, maybe there's special challenges. Maybe you have a swell that's coming through there that with some of our rain stuff, you may have a larger volume of water. So you may need some hay bales or some things like that to slow that velocity down, something more substantial than just that silt fence. So, you know, we understand that. So that's fine. So it's supposed to be changed. That's the whole idea. Large construction sites, we just covered that. And the one thing, again, if it's less than 1 acre, you don't have to have a TCEQ permit. Now, that doesn't mean that okay, I'm free to pollute. As a matter of fact, that's for a long time. We had an EPA audit, and several of them actually, and they came to nail my hide on the wall. And one of the things they asked, were we inspecting construction sites less than 1 acre? Well, it's not covered by the permit. You know, why would I do that? Well, the reason we were doing that, and actually I did that on my, don't want my boss around, I did that on my own authority, because those were some of the worst, and if you've been around Houston for a while, you know, inside the loop, you know, these condos were going up everywhere, and they were some of the worst sites around. And it just, they were going up so fast. And so, realizing, and I said, look, guys, we're just going to inspect them like any other site. We're not going to, it's not going to be any better, not any worse. We're just going to make them, they have to have some controls there, because we don't want that going in our storm sewer, first for the pollution. Second of all, what have all of us worried about now? It's the flooding, right? I flooded too, so it's, you know, I'm with everybody. It's not good. And matter of fact, that's probably one of the things that really resonate probably very well now, you know, with everybody here in Houston, because everybody's concerned about that. I get asked about flooding all the time. I said, look, if you don't have flood insurance, get it now. It's never cheaper. If you live in Houston, get it. That way, maybe you'll have sleep a little better at night. Okay, we talked about that. We have a few photographs. This right here this is at a larger construction site. This is out there near Greens Point. This was their postings board. You'll see this generally right there near their construction site. Of course, actually they were just starting. This is pretty much empty. But this small board here, this is their stormwater. This has their stormwater pollution prevention plan. Site notices, and a lot of times they'll have their SWP3 plan book in a lockbox, maybe behind these. It'll have a keyed lock on it, so we have access to it. So because we don't, when we go out to a site, we don't tell them, okay, in 2 weeks we're going to be out there to inspect your site. We just show up. We're finished. I'm finished. Anytime you want. Any questions on anything? This right here, the rest of it really is just some of our best management practices that you'll see. So, I mean, you haven't missed just a whole lot. But again, you know, this is a construction site entrance that's just terrible. You see this all the time. This is some silt fence this is installed correctly. This is silt fence that contractors ran over. Lots, and it happens. It really does. Some contractors don't feel like they need anything at all, so this is what happens in the rain event. So, like I say, we are out there every day. Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, I came in a little late. So when you do find these types of situations, this is where the companies get fined or the owner?
Here's what we do. They would like us to issue citations to the company. We don't do that because the company doesn't have a driver's license. Okay? So if you're the superintendent, you're in charge of that site. So we come to you, Mr. Superintendent, here's deficiencies that we found. Many times we'll give them an opportunity to clean it up and get it right, okay? And say, look, this is serious, get it fixed. Many times they'll respond to that. There are some times, though, that I tell my guys it's just no-brainers. They're out there pouring concrete and half of it's going into the storm sewer. Sorry. You know, you get a ticket. If you don't understand, you know, that you shouldn't be doing that, maybe the judge can explain it better than I can, okay? And so we'll give a ticket right away. Not every time, but on something like that, I mean, that's just egregious, okay? And so, yes, sir.
I want to thank you for your presentation, actually. It's always good to hear the other side of the fence talk about, you know, why y'all are out there and what you're doing. So to follow up her question, with the exponential building growth that we've seen in the past 4 to 6 years, do y'all have enough kind of staff to keep up with this?
Of course not.
I would suggest,
No.
I'm just hypothetical here.
Who has the staff to do it?
I would propose is some of these not utilizing best practices that you just mentioned, dumping like concrete into a 36 or 24 storm sewer line into the gutter inlet is probably what's creating a problem for the water backflowing up in the community. You see what I'm saying? So
They don't waste concrete like that on purpose. No, nobody's going to go over there and empty their concrete truck, you know, into a storm sewer just to get rid of it. No. Does it ever happen? Yes, it does. Okay, but as far as the contractor, he's paying for every bit of that. That's out of his pocket. So he's not going to order a bunch just to put in the storm sewer just to harass us and see if he can get by with it. It does happen. Many.
the skill level that people out there building right now, you can tell it's still apart.
They're required to have a washout area, a concrete washout area at every site. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good. Okay, this right here is a typical concrete washout area. This right here is on the interior of their site. It's not near any storm sewers or anything. And yeah, it's muddy and stuff like that, but guess what? It's really not going anywhere. It's fairly well contained. This right here will set up, and they can put that in the dumpsters, okay? This right here is unacceptable. It's right by the street. I mean, it's just, you know, I issued a citation not too long ago. It was they were pouring a road, and they had their skips right by the curb, and they were washing it out. They were, you know, I don't blame the drivers. They're trying to get their truck clean to get the next load. I mean, you know, you do have to wash it out, but it was going right down the storm sewer, right down the gutter into the storm sewer. I had my little handy pH strips. I was getting 12, well, not quite 12.5, but let's say 12. Went to the superintendent, told him, well, you know, give that guy a ticket. I said, no, it's your site. You're the one that put those there. I'm not blaming that poor old truck driver, you know, working for minimum wage, and he's, you know, there it is. He's going to wash it out. You put it there. you had 50 acres to put that somewhere where it wouldn't go into the storm sewer. So, no, give me your license. He was not happy with me. He was very unhappy with me. But that does happen. This is another container, a washout area. You do want to make sure that the seals are good. This right here, you don't see it a whole lot, but you do see it. So they have various methods to do that, okay? But that's one of the more common things. A lot of times they can, like on a street contract that's replacing a street section, they'll wash out right there in the excavation, and then they'll be pouring that, in probably the next few hours and stuff. Okay? Any other questions? Okay. Thank you all very much. Appreciate that.